Hey guys, on today's show, we're going to be building the highly coveted K6ARK portable antenna. This is a QRP antenna, very, very small, probably the smallest antenna you've ever seen, and they're now available through its Amazon stores. We're going to get right to it. We're going to build it right here, right now on Ham Radio for Non-Techies. Hey guys, welcome back to Ham Radio for Non-Techies, where we try to simplify the ham radio hobby to get you to study for and pass your tests and get you on the air and enjoying the ham radio hobby as much as we do. Now, like I said, we're going to be building out the K6ARK portable end-fed half-wave antenna today. It's a really small antenna, about the size of a quarter, maybe a little bit smaller. Got a lot of intricate parts, but we got a lot of building to do with this thing. It's not a difficult build, but you have to take your time when you're building it. So we're going to go downstairs, we're going to get that thing built and rock and roll with it. Now, certain points where I'm winding the toroids and stuff, I'm going to be speeding up those things. There's no use to sitting there watching me try to fiddle with winding the toroids up and stuff. So we're going to get that all rocking and rolling. I'll see you guys downstairs. We'll get this party started. All right, guys. So after you determine which of the three configurations you want to build, in this case, like I said, we're going to be doing the 49:1 end-fed half waves. That's pretty much my preferred type of antenna. You want to set up all your parts. And in the parts list, you're going to have your K6ARK sticker. You're going to have your 26 gauge magnet wire, your 26 gauge poly stealth wire, a plastic coil form, a 3/4 inch heat shrink tubing, another 3/4 inch of heat shrink tubing, your BNC connector, male or female, your 100 picofarad SMD capacitor, which is that little tiny itty bitty thing you can barely see right there. Then you're going to have your custom PCB board, your FT-5043 toroid, and a 3/64 inch heat shrink tubing. So when you have all your parts there, I highly recommend that you read through. I printed out the instructions, but read through all the instructions a couple times. Make sure you know your steps. Don't get ahead of yourself and take your time with this build. I don't think it's going to be overly difficult, but it's going to be intricate. It's going to require precision, and it's going to require 100% of your attention at all times, especially when you're trying to put this little tiny capacitor onto this PCB board. That's going to be the hardest, probably one of the hardest parts. The tedious parts are going to be wrapping the toroid and then assembling everything. Should hopefully be a snap. But like I said, again, go back through the instructions and read everything and make sure you know exactly where you want to be. Okay, so the first part of this build is going to be getting that capacitor onto these little tiny pads right here and here. So what the instructions indicate is to put a small amount of solder on one of these SMA or one of these pads, SMT pads, and then bring the capacitor over, put it on top, and then hold it with tweezers, and then try to re-secure one side. Once you have the one side done, then you can move on and get the next side soldered on. So we're going to go ahead and do that and get that taken care of now, and see how it works. Okay, so taking our soldering iron here, burning the crap out of myself. Solder. There. Okay, so that wasn't too difficult. I grabbed it with tweezers, and with a second set of tweezers, I was able to peel off the top piece of plastic that was on here. So you just got to be patient with it. It's such a small item, but such an important item. I want to make sure I'm super careful not to lose it or drop it, because if I dropped it, this project's over before it begins. We'll go ahead and dump it out here on the tray. And discard the housing for the thing. And now the fun part. Hold that there. Get our iron. Not the way to do that. think that's on there. We'll check it here in just a second. I want to go ahead and while I've got this out, go ahead and solder the other side. I think we're okay. Like I said, this project is going to be tedious only because you've got to be real careful with your soldering points. Make sure you got everything on there the way it's supposed to be. I think we're good. I'm going to go ahead and pick this up and take a look at it. Looks as if we are on the board. It's going to come off. So there you go. That has been soldered on. Let's get this to focus in a little bit better. Give me 1 second. So we got this to be soldered on here. So you want to make sure you got your soldering connections done correctly. And no screw ups. So I think we got that part done. So that being secure on there, we'll move on to the next part. So one thing I will say about putting this on, you know, again, I don't think this is something that a beginner. I mean, you can try it, but you know, if you screwed it up, I don't know if you'd have to have, you know, a couple of these little capacitors here to put it back on and try not to do it again. But in level of difficulty, it wasn't that hard if you take your time. What it was 11 on a scale of 1 to 10 on tedious and the fear factor, having never done this before. But I think this is done just fine. I think it's nice and secure, and I went back and checked it again. So with that, we're going to move on to the next part of the build, which is getting the counterpoise wire and installing the radiating wire and attaching the stub onto this board here. Okay, so next on the instructions, it says to take the poly stealth wire and roughly cut it in half. But in doing so, you want to make sure that one piece is an inch longer than the other. So that's the halfway mark there. We'll go back 1 inch, and I think we'll cut right there. That's where we'll make our cut. Since I didn't bring my snips with me, do it like this. There we go. So I have both pieces here, one a little longer than the other. I get them straightened out as much as I can. But now I guess that's a little a little bit longer than a frickin' inch. But all right, well, whatever. If not, I've got some more poly stealth wire I can use on this build in case I really did screw up something just now. But I think we're probably okay. Okay, so for the next part of the build here, we've cut a piece of our poly stealth wire, and you're supposed to, from the bottom side, I guess the bottom side is where the capacitor is, you flip it over. You want to find the hole that's marked antenna or ANT, which is right here. Kind of hard to see, but yeah, it's right there. So we're going to take our wire, we're going to feed it into the back side. And I'm going to go ahead, use some tools here, ever so carefully. We'll get a little solder on that. believe that's in there just fine. Soldered up beautifully. You can kind of see. Let's see if we get that focus back in again. So you can see I've got it in there. So there you go, guys. You can see I've got it in there now. And of course, it's hanging out a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and snip that off. Take my little snips here. Snip off the top part. There we go. Nice little solder joint there. That should work. Okay. So we labeled from the bottom side of the board and soldered in place on the antenna section there. We'll insert the other end of the wire through a nearby strain relief hole so it comes out the top of the board. So I guess... Okay, so going back and looking at the instructions, he says to feed the wire. So we brought the wire into the bottom of the board and soldered it right up here at the antenna point. So you got that wire sticking out. I found another hole in here, and he says to feed that back through as a strain relief, and then pull it back through till it's nice and flush onto board, kind of like you see here. That should be sufficient. And he says optionally you can add counterpoise, but I kind of agree with him. I don't normally use a counterpoise wire with an end-fed half wave. But if you want to, their instructions do talk about how to add the other wire onto here and complete that section. But I think I'm good with this the way it is. I don't really want a counterpoise on here. It's either going to work or it's not. So let's keep rolling and move on to the next section. Okay, so now that we've completed working with the little board here and getting everything set up, got the capacitor on there, got our antenna wire on there. The next one we have to start dealing with is the next most tedious part, which could be wrapping this little itty bitty toroid. So we're going to get that all taken care of here. You start by unwrapping all of your wire, and you want to fold back about 3 inches at one end. And starting with the folded end, which is your ground, in the center of the toroid pointing down, you want to wind in a clockwise direction. So we're going to make 3 full turns with both wires, and we'll continue winding the long wire, 18 more turns for a total of 21 secondary turns that are going to be evenly spaced around the toroid. And then we'll twist the ground stub a few times. They'll fit in the ground hole, and we'll trim the wire to length of about 1/4 inch. So let's go ahead and get that part done. And hopefully this will be the part where I don't throw the computer and everything out the window. So stand by. Okay, so I've got my wire unwound here, got all of it sitting out ready to roll. I went ahead and measured out 3 inches from the end and folded that over. Now the instructions do not indicate whether you should twist this before you start wrapping it around the toroid here. And most of the time when I've done this, I've always had where you twisted this wire up a little bit and then wrapped it, so it made it a lot easier to deal with. He doesn't mention it in here, so I don't think I'm going to do it. I'll go ahead and just do it the way he says and just trust on that. It really shouldn't make a big difference, I would hope, but I think it just maybe keeps down the keeps being so tedious when you're trying to wrap this thing. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing through here. I'm going to go ahead and leave enough space for this to be wrapped. Actually, you know what? I'm going to try it. Let's see. I really want this thing to be right about there. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this around. I think that also, by twisting it, making this all one wire, would really help with keeping this part here more together. I think I'm going to go ahead, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and just twist it. If I screw it up, I screw it up. But I think this thing would work a lot better and be a lot easier if this part was twisted up a little bit.
So with that being done, now I can go through here and set this up the way it's supposed to be. And we'll get our turns. Making sure you pay mind that you want to keep this as tight as possible to the toroid. And I don't really care if I'm pronouncing it the wrong way or the right way. I'm the one building the thing and I'm the one shooting the video. That down in there. And like I said, originally the thing is you want to take your time with this. You're not in any hurry. Do not rush, because rushing will screw you. Make sure you're not overlapping anything on your toroid. Make sure everything stays nice and tight. That was one turn. Well, actually, wait a minute. That was 2 turns. So we have a third. That might be why he didn't suggest twisting it. Again, making sure that everything's all nice and tight. You know, it's really hard to film this and tighten all these things. So I think we're good there. I think. With that being out of the way, take our little wire there and make sure that stays where it is, because now we're going to take the rest of this and do the remaining 18 turns. Okay, so the remaining 18 turns going to be just simple. Make sure everything stays out of the way. Make sure you don't kink up your magnet wire. I'm going to go ahead, get that in there. Nice and easy. 1. Think like you're going to start running out of room, you might want to go back a little bit, kind of clean up your spacing. Just a smidgen. We have our 18 wraps plus the 3 that are the double wrap for a total of 21 as the instructions indicated. And then I guess we're going to work on the next part. So stay with me 1 second. Okay, so I went ahead and cut all the wires. He suggests cutting about a 1/4 inch on each one, on all 3, but I'm going to err on the side of caution here. So I'm keeping them kind of long here. And depending upon how the next part of this goes, as far as attaching them to the board, I can always put them through, solder them, and then cut off the remainder. I think that's a safer way to go for me, since I don't have any experience with this antenna yet, and everything right now is very, very new, and I don't want to screw up after wrapping that entire thing. So we'll work on the next part. And again, he says trim the wires stubs to length, about a 1/4 inch. Strip the enamel from these using a razor blade. The remaining enamel will burn off when soldering. Okay, so this next part's going to be a little bit more difficult to sit here and demonstrate, so I'm just going to kind of try and show you as much as I can. You're going to have 3 little holes here, here, and here. So one is going to be in, one is going to be out, and one is going to be ground. Now, as indicated on the diagram for the build instructions, when you have your toroid wrapped here, this will be your in, the center one that's twisted will be your ground, and the one that the one we wrapped around all the way around the toroid will be your out. So these 3 wires need to fit into this board, and we're going to feed it in from the bottom or from the top. So it'll come through this way. And that's how we're going to get that seated in there. So let's go ahead and get that rolling and go from there. So it was a little bit of a bear. With the twisted wire, I had to cut the loop off the top to get it to fit through the board. But I got it on there, and it just kind of sandwiches in. It won't be anything overly difficult to accomplish or deal with. And I believe we're good. Should be good to go here. Everything's all nice and through here, the way it's supposed to be. Nice and tight. Gonna put a little tension on that. Make sure everything is where it's supposed to be. And that is seated on there nicely. So we're going to go ahead and solder these in place, and then we'll trim the studs. Before I do that, we want to scrape some of the solder wire off here. Bugger gets hot fast. I want to scrape off some of this stuff so we get a good contact with the board. I make sure and you want to be careful here. You want to try to get as much off. Probably better to do it before you mount the PCB board to the toroid. But I want to make sure I'm getting it right where I want to put the solder points. I'm getting everything all scraped off and clean. We're going to give it one last little check before we do any soldering. All right. With that wire all being taken care of there, go ahead and solder. Look at here. Just fine. All right. So next part is to clip off our studs, or stubs. Goes down, juiced as much as possible. Should be good to go. Now, just for good measure, I'm going to go ahead and check one last time. I think that center one could probably use a little bit more attention. I'd rather be safe than sorry. Not my best soldering job, but I think it'll work. Got no soldering bridges on here, so we're good there. So now the next part, which ought to be a lot of fun, is going to be soldering this board to our BNC connector. Pretty self-explanatory how this works. You got five pins coming out of your BNC connector, and you got 5 holes in here. I'm going to assume, unless the instructions say otherwise. Yeah, so we just got to make sure we get as many of these through the hole as possible. We're going to fold back our toroid just a little bit, ever so carefully, since we just put those solder points in here. So we'll put this thing through, and he suggests trying to get as many of the ground pins soldered into here as possible on the top side. Obviously, we're not going to be able to get all the way back there because the way we have this thing inside of the let me try and get over here. We don't, because the way this is soldered here, we have a kind of a hinge, but we can still try to get these through and get that up in there and get that soldered as best as possible. Especially want to pay attention to your ground, which would be that center point. I don't know if you can see that. It's the little center point here that my tweezers are on. There, I make sure that gets soldered for sure, but as many of these outer pins as possible. I'm gonna go ahead and set this up and see about getting that soldered, and we'll be right back. Okay, so this is where it's going to get a little bit hairy for me, but I am trying to make this work. So I can get back in focus here a little bit. So I'm trying to carefully get these pieces soldered on here. And I had to bring out another little tool, act as a second set of hands. Hopefully this thing's soldered in here. Well, I know I got that center one done. I got most of the other ones on here. I couldn't get all of them. I did try, but I think we're good so far. We'll see how this continues to move here. So I guess the next part is just going to be putting in the heat shrink. I'm going to go back and pause the video here for a second and figure out my next steps. Okay, so after checking everything, making sure everything on the antenna here is soldered correctly, no solder bridges, none of that stuff. Looks like we're ready to go for the next section. And that is taking some of our heat shrink and just cutting it roughly in half, but dropping things. And we add that onto the antenna wire. We bring that down to the end. Add a little bit more strength. Go ahead and use my little tool here to get that shrink wrapped. And voila, that is done. Okay, so with that being done, the next part is going to be cutting a 3/4 inch heat shrink. Interesting. Place the heat shrink on the toroid. It just comes up just a little bit above it. I assume something like that would work. Looks like a big piece of heat shrink. Hope that's going to fit. I'll get our heat shrink tool. Carefully. time. Make sure it's positioned properly before we commit. Go ahead and get it all in there. I didn't know if that heat shrink was actually going to wrap because it was so big. This is a pretty large piece compared to what's here, but it shrunk down pretty nicely. Everything's staying put. It's also very, very hot. I'm trying to not mess with it too much, but I want to just make sure everything's all nice and edged in there, just the way it's supposed to be. But I think we're good. I do a little bit more adjustment here, and this thing's not so piping hot. You can probably fry an egg on it right now the way it is. But yeah, I think that's good so far. I think we've accomplished it. I think that's done, guys. It's a matter of hooking up a wire to this, plugging into the radio, or plug it into the RigExpert, and once we get our wire cut, fine tune it, make it resonant, and give it a shot and test it out. Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, world's smallest antenna. Anyway, I'll check back to here in just a second. Let me get some more stuff done, and I'll come back. All right, guys, so what I did here is I took that wire out here and I bent it around. I put a little clasp on there and crimped that down so it'd be like a strain relief. I used one of the little S-Biners, and I already have my holes drilled through there. I'm not going to be using that end of it, though. But I got that on there so I can clip that on. And on here, I've got a little banana clip that I just ran the wire into, stripped off the wire, stuck it in there, and soldered it through there's little tiny holes right here. And I dropped some solder down there. I dropped some shrink wrap on top of that to keep it all nice and secure. So this will now go into the other side, which I really haven't going to have a hard time showing you here right now, but I picked up some more wire. So on the other side, I got this little banana clip here, as you can see, and that will fit inside of this piece. So let me, give me 1 second, I'll get that put together. Okay, so anyway, I've got the little banana clips connected there now. So now this will plug directly into my 705 on this side. I'll run this wire up. I also made a voice coil. If you follow the instructions he had on there, he had that little piece of tubing that will allow you to build a little, I think it electrically lengthens the wire. But I made a little coil there using the parts he gave, and we're going to get this out on the tuner. We're going to check it out on the RigExpert and see if we can get it resonant on 40 and 20, and then we'll give it a shot on the radio and see how it works out. But that's basically how I did that. Is kind of did a series of a series of S clips here, put the banana clip in so I can take that off if I need to, and keep this part separate. But that's just for more convenience. You can figure out how you want to do. You can make it a permanent thing if you want by, crimping and soldering. But I wanted mine to be a little modular, so I did this for it. Or if I want to use different size wire for something else. But I'll take this out. We'll set this up on the antenna pole, and we'll check it out on the RigExpert. So stay tuned. Okay, so I can now properly show you guys how I set this wire up. You see I've got a loop in here. I took some shrink wrap, made a little loop. This will go into this side of the S-Biner, and then I'll just clip it right in here to give that strain relief. I've got the coil up the side here. I've got it up on my spider pole way up there, which is about 41 feet due to the length of the wire. So we'll get this all hooked up and we will get it on the analyzer. Okay, so with that all now hooked up on here, that's all ready to go. We're going to plug it into the RigExpert. Okay, I had the RigExpert set up for the middle of the general band, which was 7.237 according to my calculations. You can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but it looks like I'm perfectly resonant around 7.162. Now if I go to 7.237 and click back over to here, I'm still showing about a 1.22, 1.23 SWR in the middle of the band. So I'm okay with that. I might make a couple more tweaks here, but so far I'm pretty happy. So now I'll switch over bands. Let's do 014, 237. I'm sitting about 1.42, 1.43. So we'll try that again. 014250. So I'm at 1.38. If I want to check the SWR graph. Yeah, so it looks like I'll be perfectly resonant somewhere around, well, way out of the band. So that might need some more tweaking as well. But, you know, it's just a matter of just playing with it. You know, there's no reason for me to give you guys the exact wire lengths. It might differ for you based on your situation and stuff. But I think we've got a good start here. And just going to keep rolling. So yeah, I'm at 1.41. I want to see if I can shorten this a little bit and see if we can get a little bit better performance out of it. But so far, you know, that's acceptable for me for this radio. I might just go ahead and hook up to the 705 real quick and see if we can get anything on there. So just stand by. All right, guys, so we're out at my favorite little testing park. I come out here to test gear before I bring it out in the field. And it just gives me a way to kind of, you know, prove the quality of stuff before I go way the hell away from my house. And I got no way to get back without a, you know, considerable drive. So let me show you what we got set up here. Let me find the reverse camera. Okay, so I have the K6ARK antenna hooked up to my spider beam pole. Got up about 41 feet. Coming back down to here, you can see I've got the coil already integrated into it. And I showed you guys earlier how I set up the coil so that it's all ready to roll and it's plugged directly into my 705. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to get on the air with it and see if it works. We already did the SWR test. You saw the last part of the video there. And the SWR seemed to be pretty good. Even the radio thought it was, you know, way below 1.2 to 1. So that's really acceptable SWR readings for me. So I'm going to put it on 20, try it out. We'll test out on 40. Maybe I'll do some park hunting, since I'm not an actual official Parks on the Air park, but I still want to see if I can reach somebody. And we're going to be running only 10 watts, so it'll be nominal. But at least I'm away from the guy with the solar panels on his house. So let's get right to it, and I'll see you guys shortly.
7-3, this is Alpha Delta Zero Whiskey November. There was a call sign I asked to come back later.
Yeah, that's Kilo India 5, November Papa Lima. Kilo India 5, November Papa Lima.
I copy Kilo India 5, November Papa Lima. You are at 55 in the park, Kilo 6501, QSL.
I copied at 55, and you are at 5959 in Texas.
Thank you, sir, for the 59 out of Texas, and thank you for hunting. Happy New Year, 7-3.
Happy New Year, 7-3.
Roger, Roger. I'll clear with November India 5 or Kilo
So,
India 5, November
on 20 meters, works just fine. I'm not sure if we'll be able to pick up anybody on 40 meters. I'm going to give it a shot here. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll get someone. But he got me in at a 5.5 out of, I think, New Jersey or something like that. I'll have to go back and look at the log. But that was pretty impressive so far. So, you know, this antenna works. This antenna is great. So let's keep rocking and rolling. Let me get on 40 meters, see if there's anybody possibly on there I can pick up, and we'll go from there. Kilo India 5, November Papa Lima, QRP.
Okay, who's ending in Lima QRP?
Kilo India 5, November Papa Lima, QRP. I copy 55 into Kilo 6291. You're about a 4747 in Texas.
Okay, what's that?
Texas, Tango X-ray.
All right, got you in Texas, 73. Thanks for the QRP contact.
All right, so I'm going to turn this down now. So guys, I wasn't expecting to get, and let me get out of this echo here. I wasn't expecting to get anybody on 40 meters, and it took a little while because I'm running QRP, but I got it on 40 meters. He heard me at about a 5.6, 5.5, something like that. So I'm pretty good with that. So I think this antenna works. Let's go back to the studio now and wrap up with final thoughts, and I'll show you guys where you can pick up your own K6ARK antenna. And if you're up for the build, I think you'll have a good time with this antenna. I think it'll be really fun. I mean, it's made for, like, you know, if you're doing QRP 20 watts and lower, if you're gonna do summits on the air, stuff like that, throw it up in a tree somewhere, be ready to roll. It's a great little antenna. I have no qualms about it. It's super portable. I mean, aside from the big wire winder and all the wire I got to carry, the antenna itself is super small. It fits in your shirt pocket. So, I mean, and it's super easy to deploy. If you don't use the, if you don't use a pole where you set up tent stakes to hold it up, use that little technique you learned on other channels where you lean it into a tree. I think K8MRD came up with that. So either way, getting this thing out there and deployed is not very hard. It does work. I wasn't able to make any contacts on 15. There's only one guy out there doing parks on the air stuff. Couldn't reach him. But you saw the SWR on 40, 20, and 15. I'm probably have to work a little bit on 10. Maybe call Adam and see what I can do to get 10 meters to come up. It might be something on my end that's screwed up. But hey, look, I'm pretty impressed with this antenna. So I'll see you guys back at the studio.
All right, guys. Well, there you have it. I know it's a long video. You stood by me while I built this thing. I tried speeding up some of the more tedious parts that aren't really worth watching. If you know how to wind a toroid, you know how to wind a toroid. But we took it out in the field there. I started out in the backyard. I had too much noise back there, so I went ahead and just jumped out to the park and did it out there. I was able to make 2 contacts. We did one on 20 meters, and we did one on 40 meters. Again, I tried 15. Now, the one correction I got to make, I was saying on there I was on 10 watts. I had forgotten to hook up the battery, so I was actually operating on 5 watts out there, but I still got those 2 contacts. Heard me about a 5.5, 5.3, something like that. Really great antenna, guys. So the way to get this antenna, if you want to get it, is go to K6ARK.com. He has a shop button on his website there. Click on the link. It'll have links to go to his Amazon store. You can purchase this thing. I think it's $19.95 or something like that. It's a really, really cool little antenna. If you want something you can build, and take your time doing it. Don't waste. Don't rush through it and screw something up. Take your time. There's no hurry. But when you get this antenna built, you got the smallest antenna I've ever seen. And it just works. It's a great little antenna. I cannot wait to get it out to the park and actually try it out, doing some QRP with the 705 out in the field. So that's going to be probably one of my next videos. I'll go out there and actually do an activation with that and see how long I can run it and see what happens. But so far, I'm very impressed. I don't think you can go wrong with this antenna. I don't know if this is necessarily a beginner's antenna. If you know a little bit about soldering, you can probably get through it. The instructions are very clean, very concise. He tells you exactly what to do, just like, Callum over at DX Commander. If you decide to get this antenna, take your time with it. You'll be very happy. It's a really cool antenna. Anyway, guys, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. That helps the YouTube algorithm show my video to more people. And since I'm trying to wrap this thing up, please also consider subscribing and clicking on a little thumbs up to be notified when I do new videos. Until then, guys, have a great day. Go out and get yourself a couple of these antennas and have fun building them. This is Ham Radio for Non-Techies, and we are clear.